Hey, welcome back to Garbro's Field Desk. I have for you Chapter 15 of Section 222, the second to last chapter of the book. Chapter 16 is written, voice lines are out, and when that is out, Section 222 will come to an end, and then Emily Braun's Book 2 will begin. Like, subscribe, visit the coffee, donate if you like us, and Redcon 1 if you need any protein or supplement needs. Let's get into the book. Chapter 15. The Apache, the Cheyenne, the Dragonfly. Dragonfly 1.
Solid splash. Looks like I hit the back line and most of their reinforcements.
Soup said over her mic, banking her A-37 in a wide arc to survey her drop. Groon let go of the trigger, having just finished a quick burst on a line of archers he had spied in time. They're cooking.
Groon, Gremlin is picking up multiple signatures.
Fibbins said in alarm, digesting the information coming in through her screen.
4 smaller ones and a larger one moving at rotor-wing speeds.
Groon clicked on his mic. Cartwheel, your prize has arrived. Section 222. Helena stood in shock as great clouds of flame curled into the air. The plumes of fire casting light so bright she almost had to squint and hold her hand in front of her good eye. From within the light, hundreds of forms writhed out into the darkness, carrying with them the illuminating fire that turned their bodies into walking torches. They all twisted in mass, clawing at their faces, slapping at their arms and bodies, all in futility as the dragon fire turned the fat in their bodies to more fuel. The figures dispersed in all directions, fanning out as if trying to escape the hellish core of the strike center. To Helena, it reminded her of when her father would burn out nests of tomars, little insects fleeing the whole of flame.
Cringe's mercy.
Helena gasped as she realized that she was watching hundreds of enemy soldiers who were tightly packed in formation burn alive together. The screams of the horses were by far the worst, their wails of anguish shattering the air like the cry of some forlorn creature of nightmare. She had little time to fully take in the scene before she heard a challenging roar to her left and spun, her broad fighting great knife flashing up into a guard.
Oh no, no!
Helena cried out as she quickly backstepped to try and create more space between her and the charging human.
Come on, we can talk about this.
The human, a taller, muscular female with raven black hair tied into a tight bun, held the axe to an HMMV in her hands, the green polymer handle already flecked with blood that dripped from the head. She had appeared in addition to hundreds of other enemy soldiers who had broken formation to get away from the heat of the flames, causing the flanks to erupt into duels and trooper-to-trooper combat, each trying to hedge their way into the main formations. Here, I'll handle this one, you take the orc. The axe-wielding son of Odin barked out to her, and Helena turned to see him forcefully shove an orc towards her as he leveled his shoulders and charged the female human.
This isn't much better.
Helena cried out as she had to duck a terrifically swift backhand strike from the orc, the studded mace rumbling over her head by inches.
Can we switch back?
Her question was met by laughter. Helena scrambled backwards to get enough space to fight, then bounced off of another friendly spearman who was intertwined with an orc himself. She held the blade over her shoulder, her other hand held low for balance as she stepped forward, removing herself from the struggling spearman.
All right, you big bastard. Let's go then.
Gladly. The orc barked back at her in rough Tunka, pulling out a shorter dagger to dual wield with the mace. "Another ear for my belt." Helena's teeth flashing a grimace as she took a step forward, the orc's sudden strike slipping by her shoulder as she drove the handguard of the blade into the orc's knee. Despite the audible crack and the orc falling down onto the wounded limb, this did not stop the flurry of blows coming in Helena's direction. The knife skipped off the broad side of her blade as Helena deflected it, but had to simply dive out of the way to avoid the mace turning her skull into a mess of shattered bone and gore. The mace swung so wide from the dodge that it caught a militiaman in the back of the knee, causing it to shatter wetly and protrude from the flesh. The Valley Elf fell to the ground with a scream, but was silenced by the Alberdan Valley Elf he had been brawling with, his frying pan landing on the ground with a dull, metallic thud. "Come now, sister, we can discuss this," the human called out to the woman he was dueling, ducking and weaving her wild strikes. "There's no need to make a mess of us here in the battlefield, you know."
You idiots ruined everything!
She screamed, ducking a language strike from the son of Odin.
We were on the cusp of greatness! Immortality!
The son of Odin grinned. "Spoken like a true believer."
Better a believer than a traitor!
She roared and launched herself bodily into the other human. Helena dove again and rolled onto her feet, the mace impacting into the ground with an earthy thump. Helena brought her blade from across her knee into a long, sweeping strike through the orc's throat, opening his body from his clavicle and leaving the side of his neck with a spray of blood.
"He's on your 6.
Helena whipped her head around, standing up fully as the orc gurgled and fell to the ground, the knife still clutched in his hand. Behind her, Limmick was clutching a radio, his eyes trained to the sky as multiple militiamen held out their newly acquired spears, poking and jabbing at anything that got too close.
Limmick, what are you doing?
Helena called out, going to run out to him but finding herself once again challenged by a charging Alberdan Valley Elf.
Oh, for fuck's sakes.
"We have birds overhead."
Limmick called out, turning in a circle on the ground as he tracked something.
"And they have some here too. I'm trying to give them warnings when I can, and we need more napalm."
This new challenger before Helena was fully armored with plate and mail, and Helena brought the fighting blade into a low guard, her free hand resting on its spine. Above her, multiple gouts of flares popped and hissed into the air, an A-37 streaking by with its main gun buzzing at something else in the sky. There was no banter this time. Merely a flash of an enemy longsword coming towards Helena's face. Helena brought her blade up in defense and the longsword rang away from her. She quickly half-jogged forward, her boot heels hissing on the slick grass as she flicked the sword to her offhand, spine facing outwards. The blunt bash against the elf's cheeked helmet threw him off guard, stumbling a few steps to the left as Helena tossed a blade back into her main hand to bring it down onto the elf's neck. The ring of metal told Helena the longsword had metalled her blow, and she staggered backwards as a sweeping counterstrike along her belly missed her only by inches.
"Cobra, on your 6 again!"
Limmick cried out, and Helena jerked her head to an oddly violent sound of a rocket being launched some feet above her.
"Go low, near the burning buildings."
The roiling melee around Helena paused for heartbeats as two craft thundered overhead, lurching out of the darkness like wraiths. The cover spell had finally been broken for good. The Apache's heavy blades broke the sky with bone-quaking chops, turning a hard right as the M230 chain gun fired constantly, rippling rounds down the line of struggling auxiliaries. Close on its tail was the Cheyenne, the front minigun turret spewing a line of tracers at the Apache while the 20mm grenade launcher chugged high explosive death down below, turning tight knots of enemy infantry to shreds of meat and armor. Helena realized the other elf was on his feet, and she brought her low guard back into place, hand resting on the spine. The elf brought his tip low, edging towards her with slow steps as she slowly walked around him. She had only 3 areas to strike, those not covered by his thick armor, one of which was the opening of his helmet, out of which cool eyes watched her.
Knight?
Helena asked, slowly walking around in a circle as he stepped towards her still. She had to lunge forward to avoid getting dragged down with an orc trying to fistfight a large Oni blacksmith. The orc was not faring well, judging by the broken tusks and teeth. More flares lit up the sky, and a cobra dove into the city, avoiding an A-37's gun run. The elf nodded. Of the Ullman Guard. A low-flying cobra shuddered as multiple rounds hit it, sparking off of its armor with a cascade of metallic rattles.
Fuck.
Helena said shortly, more in a statement than an insult. Quite. The elf said, then lunged forward, stabbing at her foot as he rotated the longsword in his hand. Helena knew he meant to make her shift her foot, then drive the crossguard into her face, which became unbalanced. She also knew if she struck the blade, he would bring it around in a counter and use the momentum to slice through her chest, on which he had no armor except for empty magazines. With a growl of pain, Helena allowed the elf to drive the tip of the blade into her boot, the edge splitting in between two of her foot bones and digging into the dirt. This surprised the elf, and he paused for the barest scant of a second. Helena brought up the handguard to the fighting blade, punching forward and into his helmet opening as her other hand came down onto his own sword handle, keeping it pinned to the ground. With a crunch of buckling steel and bone, the elf fell backwards, his nose broken and spewing blood down onto his chest plate. Helena cried out again and came down onto her ass, her foot pinned into place on the ground. The elf spat out a spray of blood, then laughed, two of his teeth apparently missing. Well, I did not see that coming. You must be a regular.
A blade in the boot is better than an edge opening up your belly.
Helena growled, reaching and pulling up on the longsword. The blade slid from her boot with a bloody squeak and she tossed it down, breathing heavily as she heard the female human crash to the ground behind her. I yield, the elf said, laying back on a dead brim-touched militiaman as he pulled off his helmet. I do believe I have had enough of this today. I'm going to lay here, pretend to be dead if need be, see who comes out on top. Helena rolled her eyes as the female human moaned in pain behind her, then got to her feet with a wince.
How noble of you. Aren't you lot supposed to fight to the death for honor and king?
I swore myself to a king, but I have not seen one for some time, the elf said with a sour laugh, then sniffed. Eyes up, lass. Helena howled as someone slammed bodily into her, both of them rolling across the ground in bodies until Helena came to a rest on her back. Helena coughed, the air knocked from her lungs as she looked around wildly for her fighting blade. The darkness was lit once again by more canisters of dragonfire, and a glint caught her eye. She spotted it a few feet away and began to crawl towards it, her hair braid coated in blood and laying across her neck. The grass seemed to be soaked with the blood of hundreds of soldiers, and it made finding purchase with her boots almost impossible. Worse was having to avoid getting stepped on by the duelists around her, all embroiled in their own fights to the death. Her fingers were barely able to touch the bottom of the handle when something grabbed her boot and she was jerked away roughly.
No!
Helena cried out, digging her fingers into the wet ground as she looked over her shoulder.
No, not one of you!
Holding onto her foot was a tall, muscular human man, his face a contorted mask of rage as a torque glinted on his neck. He wore a mottled camouflage uniform, on which were multiple patches, one of which looked like some kind of screaming bird. He shouted something in English and then pulled back harshly, causing Helena to lose her grip and to slide along the ground, right into his guard. Both of them were soaked with blood, and all Helena could do was raise her arms in an attempt to fend him off, her single dark green eye wide with fear and burning with firelight.
No, stop!
The human fought hard against Helena's hands and fists, even tanking a solid slug to his jaw, and she could feel the bow buzzing in alarm underneath her. His elbow cracked against the side of her face, and Helena saw stars erupt across her swimming vision. Her defenses buckled for the single moment he needed, her hands opening and arms slackening, and his bloody hands shot around her neck.
Stop! Stop!
Helena gargled out, her own fingers scrabbling against the man's face as she sought purchase on his eyes. He was, unfortunately, taller than her, and all he had to do was lean back to avoid her grasp. Helena's brain cried out for blood as his grip dug into the arteries in her neck, and she coughed, kicking her legs at anything she could, her boots squeaking on the blood-soaked grass. She twisted with all her might as he set his lips, but she could not get away from his crushing hands. True terror and panic began to ignite in her chest as Helena understood there would be no way for her to get away from a grip like this. For a few quick beats she patted around her belt and chest rig as he choked her, her nose leaking and spittle dripping down the edges of her mouth, but she could not feel her knife. She tried to breathe in with a gasp, but nothing substantial found its way into her lungs. She shook with his strain as he clamped down further on her neck, the blood vessels in her eyes pulsing as his strong fingers dug into her flesh with conviction. Darkness began to crawl its way into her vision as she still swiped and clawed at his face in futility, dragging her nails down his skin with such force the wounds began to bleed and trickle blood onto her cheek.
Is this how I die? Strangled to death on the battlefield?
Helena thought to herself as she felt her body begin to weaken despite the panicked hammering of her heart. The human slammed Helena's head into the ground a few times while strangling her, as if trying to shake away whatever life she had left inside, and her hands slackened. Her head screamed out for air, bellowed to her that if she did not breathe, she was going to die, but she could not get air into her lungs and past his hands, no matter how hard she strained her throat muscles. She knew death was only, quite literally this time, a few heartbeats away. If she fell unconscious, he would kill her easily, likely just by breaking her neck. Helena saw the human drag up his leg, a thin knife glinting in a braided sheath on his boot. She bared her teeth at the sight of it, still struggling in vain as her bloodshot eyes stared wide-eyed at it.
He's gonna stab me,
Helena thought, her head feeling as if it was going to explode from the pressure. Helena's eye cast left and right, her vision merely pinpricks of light amongst the shadow, and to her renewed dismay, saw the son of Odin looking down at her only a few feet away, his axe raised over his shoulder. She saw the look on his face as he instantly absorbed the situation, a cleaved fey-align brim touch falling to the ground behind him almost in slow motion. Helena saw the charging, spear-wielding orc loom out of the tangle of fighters, bearing down on him with sprinter's speed.
No.
Helena wheezed out, shaking her head as her feet began to slow in their kicking. Helena looked up into the son of Odin's eyes with her bloodshot one, and she saw him smile sadly. The understanding was instant between them, and despite the lack of air in her lungs, she tried to scream, to tell him to turn around and save himself. The human who was strangling her left the job to just one of his massive hands, the other reaching down to grab his boot knife. His face was still a mask of fury, but set on his task as the black tactical blade slid away from its sheath. The son of Odin turned, bringing the axe low and then arcing it upwards into a great swing. The human strangling Helena brought up his knife, the point aimed down at her heart. Helena closed her eyes as the edge of the burning axe hissed through the neck of the human on top of her, the air ringing with a beautiful metallic note as the steel skidded deftly over the golden torque. The grip around Helena's throat slackened, and her body reacted as if she had breached through the surface of water. Helena breathed in harshly, her brain flooding back to life as she lurched to the side to avoid the waterfall of blood spewing from the severed neck, the blade of the axe having only partially cauterized the flesh. His body was heavy, and she couldn't get out from under it in time.
Watch out behind you.
Helena cried out hoarsely as the son of Odin spun around, still attempting to seize a defensive guard. Helena knew it was too late as soon as the spear punched through the human's chest, erupting out of his back with a slick of steel through flesh.
Help the human. He needs help.
Helena croaked in a strained voice, still trying to heave in lungfuls of air through her bruised neck as she pushed the body off of her. The fighting was too loud. The clang of steel too deafening. No one heard her, or may not have had the chance to carry what words she spoke. Wordlessly, the son of Odin grabbed the Orcess by her chest plate and pulled her forward as he jerked himself towards her, the spear wetly ripping further through his back. His axe came up, then down, splitting the Orcess in two from shoulder to crotch. Her organs spilled from her into a steaming pile at her feet, her body contorting as it fell in different directions. Only then, with his enemy dead, did his hand release the axe. Only then, as blood poured from his wound, did his knees buckle and fall backwards towards the ground, his body recoiling from the impact of the spearhead digging into the dirt. The shaft of the spear propped him up in a semi-lounging position, his mouth opening and closing as blood burbled through his nose and down his chin.
Sir!
Helena cried out, crawling over on her hands and knees. She fell once, her boots slipping on spilled viscera, but she righted herself and came to his side.
Why? Why did you do it?
Felt like the right choice, the son of Odin said, smiling softly to her. A good choice. Helena looked over him, the multiple wounds cut into his flesh, but knew he was not going to make it purely to the spear's rending thrust. Tears beaded in Helena's eye as she shook him by the front of his uniform despite his wounds.
You're going to die. I am not worth dying for. We need you. We need humans alive.
I have been dead for a long, long time, Archer, he said, reaching up with a shaking hand to cup her cheek. Your people need you more than they ever needed me.
Why?
Helena bawled, the roaring of victory erupting around her as the auxiliary line surged forward, renewed by something. She could hear some kind of deep thrumming music beginning to rise above the din.
You could have just turned and killed her. All she had was a spear.
Tired of saving myself. It was time to save someone else, he murmured as blood trickled from his back in streams, pooling in the grass. Take care of these for me. Helena watched as he pulled out the ring of dog tags and broke them away from his neck. Time to go see my old friends, he wheezed, placing the dog tags into her shaking hand. It's been so long.
I'm sorry.
Helena whined, clutching her hand around the bloody tags.
I'm so sorry. I'm just
You, he said, interrupting Helena with a smile and placing a bloody fist against her chest, are not a stupid elf. I'll see you in Valhalla, Archer. Live well for me. Live strong for us. He kept smiling at her, even as he died, the light leaving his eyes and the axe he wielded losing its glow. Helena held up his head with one hand as the other clutched the dog tags, and she sobbed, resting her head on his shoulder despite the rushing feet around her and the bellows of orders.
Negative. Cavalry from the east are friendly.
Limerick shouted in excitement over the now booming music. Helena stood, wiping her eye on her sleeve, then pulled the bow into her hand as the other clutched the dog tags. She turned, seeing that some kind of stage had been lit up. A human, along with Belle Del Rey the Brazen, played aggressively on some kind of strung instrument. A drummer was behind them, though she could not see much else through the chaos. The music was unnaturally loud and deep, magnified by huge speakers, and it hammered into her chest, rattling her struggling heart. It filled her with strength, with an alien conviction that felt like it was setting her on fire from the inside, though her eyes still stung with streaming tears.
Infantry is pushing forward. Danger close everywhere. Do not drop ordnance.
Limerick yelled into his handset again, looking around wildly from the now lit stage to the surging infantry lines.
I think the humans are doing their magic thing with the music.
To the east, slamming into the flank of the enemy infantry were lines of charging centaurs. On their backs were a single long, curling line of black feathers that glittered blue in the firelight, their armor a mixture of leather and layered plates. The familiar voice of Erinda rang out from the darkness, and Helena just barely spied her amongst the throng.
Forward, lads! Break their backs!
Dragonflight 1.
Flares!
Fibbin cried out as the A-37 banked hard along a row of burning buildings, the missile hot on their ass. Groon punched the button and flexed his stomach muscles as he pulled ever harder. Fucking helicopters and their fucking missiles. Fibbin sucked in breath through her lips as she splayed out, one hand pushing against the canopy as they continued their hard G-turn.
Oh fuck, it's right on us.
Groon applied more flares, then jerked back on the stick as hard as he could. Fibbin screeched as the missile zipped by their right wing and detonated against a burning building. Groon pulling the A-37 into another hard turn back the other direction to gain altitude and try to find the Cobra that locked him in the first place.
This is Donut Dolly Flight. We are heading in to drop off supplies and reinforcements.
A voice called over the radio.
All Hueys coming in hot.
He's on me.
Cartwheel cried out, and Groon swiveled his head, searching for the Cheyenne. He spied it zipping through the burning city, the Apache rounding about a temple to set up their shot.
He's using the buildings and heat to foul our sensors.
Damn it all, Groon growled, flipping the A-37 upside down and then diving down. Soup, Gilly, take out that last Cobra that's sticking around and then make sure the Hueys get here in one piece.
Already down. Splash one snake.
Soup crowed out in victory as something trailing fire dropped from the sky near the western side of the city. Groon lined up the Apache in his reticle and pulled the trigger, lacing a string of minigun fire towards it. True to their veterancy, the Apache lurched backwards and away from the fire, Groon pulling off and streaking along the other side of the temple into the air.
My turn!
Gilly shouted, his A-37 diving out of the air and sending its own spray of gunfire towards the Apache as he fired flares, a ground-to-air missile streaking just behind the A-37 and exploding in the air. The Apache turned and dove, running down through a wide street.
On him! On him! Don't let him get away!
Cartwheel screamed into the mic as he dove the Cheyenne after him. The front turret sprang after the craft while the 40mm grenade launcher shot a few rounds at retreating enemy ground forces before running dry.
He's going towards the melee.
Ah, shit, Groon said, pulling back on the stick to change direction back east. Section 222. Helena heard the singer switch to a different song, the instruments following the cue seamlessly. It was as if the music itself was sucking the morale away from the enemy and implanting it into the auxiliaries, fatigue pulling away from bodies like steam from boiling water. Now that Helena watched more closely, there was actually steam drifting off of her and every friendly trooper around her. She felt as if her body was revitalizing itself, energy seeming to come from nowhere at all. The Centaur cavalry cut through the flank as if they were moving through people made of paper, surging through to meet the charging infantry in the middle. With the sight of the charging cavalry, the infantry line surged forward in a tide, bellowing out their battle cries as victory was now within their grasp. The enemy's order of battle was buckling under the strain and falling back, attempting to reform their lines as best they could due to the crippling attacks on the reinforcements from the air. Overhead, the thunder of rotor blades caught Helena's ears and she looked up, spying the Apache chugging overhead, firing a fusillade of missiles out of odd, round-looking cylinders. The effect was immediate, blowing ranks of infantry away and creating holes where soldiers once stood. This, however, did little to slow down their charge, ramming themselves headlong into the center of the Fey melee lines. The little twitchy chain gun jerked towards the charging centaurs and began to hammer away, cutting down whatever it touched. Fully armored centaurs fell to the ground either from shrapnel wounds or from being blown cleanly away, the rounds cutting through steel and leather alike. Their iron discipline kept the centaurs on the charge, though angry eyes darted to the Apache from visor slits. Helena looked down at her handful of dog tags and felt the bow sing to her. She felt the music flow through her along with this other growling music from the stage, and she nodded. Helena set her feet, flexed her back muscles, then held her bow out in front of her.
I am not a stupid elf,
Helena said defiantly, and set her arrowless fingers on the bowstring. A warm, glorious blue light erupted around her as she pulled the string back to her cheek, and she gritted her teeth in a snarl.
I am not a stupid elf!
Dragonflight 1.
What in the hells is that?
Fibbin said, pointing to a mote of blue light down on the battlefield. Groon pulled up and away, his aircraft drive ammunition and ordnance. I don't know. Only thing we can do is ram the Apache, but Cartwheel is on it.
We're locked.
A Huey pilot screamed over the radio, and both Fibbin and Groon jerked their heads towards the east, watching as the Apache pivoted and fired a missile.
Evade! Evade!
The bright flash of the missile detonating against the Huey was hard to miss in the night sky, and the bird burst into flames as soon as it was hit. It was on its final approach, and without any altitude, it slammed into the ground, its blades breaking and spinning off into the darkness. Figures lurched or fell away from the craft, rolling into the grass.
How is it able to do that?
Fibbin cried out in horror as the other Hueys quickly touched down, their passengers throwing out crates and diving off the skids themselves. The blue light below flashed brightly as Groon and Fibbin observed, then shrieked away from the ground as if someone had launched a missile. It smashed into the side of the Apache with another clap of blindingly bright light, hard enough to cause it to swing through the air trailing smoke.
He's mine.
Cartwheel roared, the Cheyenne streaking over the top of a burning roof as smoke curled in its rotor wash.
This is the final radio call for you, demon!
The Apache swung sluggishly around, attempting to draw a bead on the Cheyenne, but another streak of blue light impacted on the engine intake, throwing off its aim once again. A ripple of minigun fire trailed its way along the Apache's cockpit and rotor assembly as the Cheyenne engaged its rear rotor, halting it just in front of the Apache as it spewed hate into the craft. The burst lasted for perhaps a second or two. Then the minigun rotated to a stop. Dry. Sparks rippled off of the Apache in showers as its armor soaked up most of the fire, but armor can only do so much against that many rounds. Only able to survive purely due to lack of ammo in the Cheyenne. With fire trailing from its engines and a deathly wobble forming on its tail, the Apache dipped its nose and fled into the night, putting all of its power into pure speed. Groon saw Cartwheel turn to chase and clicked on his mic. No, Cartwheel.
But he's almost down. We can do this.
Cartwheel cried back, his voice straining with blood-hungry desire. We're out of ammunition and a Huey down. We can't risk that, Cheyenne, and you know it, Groon growled. One cheeky ground-to-air missile and you turn into a warning for other pilots. There was no response from Cartwheel, but the Cheyenne stayed in place, tracking the Apache through the night on its escape.
Oh, signatures are retreating.
Fibbin said, breathing out in relief.
Remaining enemy air assets are retreating, so is their armor.
Groon tilted his A-37 in a wide turn, looking down at the burning Huey in the field littered with the dead. His voice was low and pondering. A victory.
A victory!
Fibbin screamed quietly, reaching over to pull a ranger bar from a small sack. Gilly, Soup, you have any ammunition left? Groon said over the radio. Soup was the first to reply.
Still got a single Caine and a lot of minigun ammo.
Can't say the same for cans, but got a fair bit of ammo left.
Gilly said, chuckling to himself. Groon blinked a few times into the night, then clicked on his mic. We're leaving the battlefield empty. Find a way to lose that weight.
With pleasure.
Soup purred back over the radio, and Groon saw both of them bank hard to chase the retreating infantry.
We're a frame down, but we're unloaded. Lifting off to get more supplies.
A Huey pilot said over the radio, and Groon saw them all lift off and away at once. See you soon, Groon said, then pushed the mic away from his mouth. Fibbin.
Yargroon?
Fibbin said thickly, already halfway through her ranger bar. Groon turned to look at her, then looked back out the windscreen instead. Good flying. Section 222.
Helena, you're okay.
Adina said, pacing towards Helena while wiping blood away from her cheek.
I had thought the worst from how many bodies were about the field.
Helena looked at Adina wordlessly as the rest of the centaurs surged past, racing after and harassing anyone stupid enough to try and hold the ground. Adina cleared her throat into her hand when Helena did not reply.
Ahem. Well, I guess you sustained injury there.
Lost an eye.
Helena said flatly, reaching up and tucking the now oddly shimmering dog tags into her breast pocket. Adina nodded.
Yes. Well, that does happen, doesn't it? Found the rescue party, though. Far more than I thought he would send. Entire dock of elite neck lancing.
Timely.
Helena said dourly, flexing her bleeding arrow hand.
Are they in full retreat?
Completely.
Limmick said happily as he jogged up to Helena and Adina, his face flushed but partially blackened from smoke.
Entire enemy army is in retreat.
How are we doing on casualties?
Helena asked, looking around at the field of the dead, dying, and wounded.
Drowning in them.
Eldehinda shouted, stalking up past through loitering infantry who were clapping each other on the back. She was soaked in fresh blood up to her elbows, and one of her knives was missing half of its blade.
Between us and them, we both battered ourselves blue in the face. This is a certain victory no matter what way you slice it.
A handsome-faced necklanzen, his helmet held under his arm and gore-covered spearing lance held proudly, trotted up beside Adina, bowing his head. My lady, the enemy forfeits the field fully. 2 lances give chase, but will turn back after a mile.
Thank you very much, Captain Crawler.
Adina piped up with a flushed smile, placing her hands on her hips.
Looks like a centaur have joined the war officially then.
The High Lance declared support for the Veil Riders in full. We just got the Harpy Messenger when the giant metal bird left. Captain Crawler said with another half bow, then stomped a hoof. I have to beg your leave, my lady. Have to reform the dock.
Off you go then.
Adina said, waving goodbye as the centaur turned and trotted away.
Let's see. There's only 3 of you here. Where's the angry horned one? Momoy and Vitka. I have a fucking name, you know.
Makarat said tersely as she set the crate she had been hauling on the ground.
Bet, and I'm the left hand of Yule's wife. So you better learn my name before I put in a bad word. Yes, there you are. Still as horned and as angry.
Adina said, crossing her arms.
What about the others?
Vitka is with the medical team. She's critical, but she'll be fine.
Eldehinda said, reaching down and pulling the lid off the crate.
Momoy is dead. Killed in a missile strike.
Adina swallowed and seemed to lose a bit of the victorious air she had about her.
Momoy is dead?
It was a quick death.
Limmick said softly, reaching down into the crate and pulling out a healing potion as well as 4 magazines of ammunition.
Unlucky, really, if anything.
I'm sorry to hear about his passing.
Erinda said, swallowing thickly.
He was a good soldier. Good man.
He was.
Helena said, and went to speak again when she caught the eye of the spear-wielding son of Odin who was walking her way.
Excuse me for a moment.
Helena left the small group and jogged over to the human, the man setting the end of his blood-stained spear on the ground. The human stared down at Helena, to her bow, then back to her face. He is gone, then.
Yes, he died saving me.
Helena said sadly, pointing.
He was stabbed through with a spear. Over there.
Did he kill his final adversary? The human asked, looking around to the Maori who was glaring down at a fistful of golden torques. Helena blinked, then nodded.
Yes, he cut her in two. He was not alone when he died. I was there.
A kindness that I'm sure will be rewarded, the human said, then looked over his shoulder. You there, auxiliary, on me. As the 5 troopers began to trot over, the human looked down, placed a finger under Helena's chin, and kissed her on the forehead. He pulled back a few inches, then whispered into Helena's good ear in a calm but morose voice, Take no strife from his death. Arthur had been seeking a worthy end for a long, long time. You should be honored he chose saving you to be his final moment. Helena nodded silently as she watched the human and the auxiliaries walk away, searching for the dead son of Odin, Arthur. She pulled out the dog tags from her breast pocket and worked her thumb over them, slowly shuffling them into view. At the very end of the string, a brighter, slightly bent dog tag came into view, still faintly glowing against her palm. On the steel tag, the words Arthur McLennan were stamped in English, and Helena made a note in her mind to make Limerick translate it all for her later. Behind Helena, the rest of Section 222 walked towards her, their ammo pouches full and bodies slowly being healed from fresh healing potions.
Here, Helena, there were some magazines for you.
Limerick said, offering her 5 magazines of 5.56.
Just in case something happens, you know?
Helena tucked her bow over her back and took the magazines, sliding them into her blood-soaked rig.
I think we're the epitome of something happens, don't you think?
Yeah, starting to feel that way.
Makarat said, looking over towards where the stage lights were being shut off one by one in order to get moved away from multiple burning speakers.
Anyone know what was up with all the music?
Eldehinda leaned back, cracking her spine.
Yeah, one of them humans felt the battle wasn't going their way and decided to try something they had been planning. Problem is, something odd cropped up when they started playing.
You mean besides all of us steaming like fresh baked bread and getting our fight back?
Helena said, reaching down and picking up a gold coin that had fallen out of someone's pocket in the fighting.
I would say so, as to how a prisoner was sucked dry and turned into a preserved corpse.
Eldehinda said with a laugh.
But that's neither here nor there. Looks like we wedged out a win, hey?
Erinda nodded, gesturing with her hands around her.
Everything came together beautifully in a grand show of strength. These metal birds flitting about the sky, dropping fire, helped us find the battlefield. You were lost.
Makarat said, amused.
What? Forget which way it was to get there?
Erinda growled in her throat.
It was night time. That makes anything difficult.
How many humans died?
Helena asked, touching the small bundle of tags in her breast pocket.
4.
Eldehinda said, sliding her blades back into their sheaths, though the broken one took some effort.
A son of Odin fell. Guess there's only one now. A lone wanderer cooked in the city after diving into some Abrams with grenades in his hands. Saved a whole bunch of us, though. And 2 of the Marines fell held in the square.
Limerick flicked one of his grenade rings that hung from the holes in his horns.
We're right truly exhausted, though. Armor's destroyed all over the place, and we lost a Huey.
Not so much.
Eldehinda said, gesturing vaguely towards the city.
Believe it or not, we captured a fair bit of armor, but no operational battle tanks. Scooped up some artillery pieces as well. And there are a lot of human prisoners.
How many is a lot?
Helena asked, remembering the groaning human woman. Eldehinda hooked her thumbs on her belt loops and leaned forward, speaking grandly.
55.
Everyone else whistled or exhaled at the number.
55 humans? Alive?
Helena said with some surprise.
How is that even possible? I thought the Fae had strengthened their magical hold over the humans.
Eldehinda sighed.
Probably has something to do with the imbecilic idea to play metal music in the middle of a damned battle. The fact it worked is going to make things rather difficult, if not interesting.
What I'm wondering is where the blue flashes of light came from.
Adina said, making rocket movements with her hands.
Streaked right from the ground and caught that flying tank in the side.
Probably just some warcaster in the right place at the right time.
Helena said matter-of-factly, still flexing her shooting hand as if it was strained.
I wouldn't worry about it.
Maybe.
Makarat said, shrugging.
Dead helpful though. That thing was about to ruin our fucking day, tell you that much.
Lights flashed in the distance and everyone turned to look at what they were. Flying wing to wing, the 3 A-37s flew over the ore's base, dropping all of their flares in a cascade of light as their engines roared overhead, the 3 aircraft turning the head back in the direction of a Hold's hangar.
Show-offs.
Limmick said with a bright smile.
Really saved our hides down here. If it wasn't for the napalm, we would have been overrun, I think.
Eldehinda gestured for them all to follow her as she began the walk.
Fae forces were really caught off guard. Had to dedicate their own air assets into the fray, which let us smack a few of them out of the sky.
What happens now, Staff Sergeant?
Helena said, tucking her hands into her pockets as she walked along beside Limmick.
Full relief. Headquarters has sent another battle group to relieve all of us and send us back home. An entire engineer battalion is coming in as well to help rebuild the city, dig graves and all that fuss.
Eldehinda said, gesturing towards the smoking, half-ruined oars.
I'm surprised the locals aren't angry.
Limmick said, watching as some of the buildings still burned.
Their home got turned into a ruin.
They'll be fine.
Eldehinda said, lighting up a hand-rolled cigarette with a bloody hand.
Oh, we're supposed to take Adina to the command tent. Something about recruiting centaurs into the auxiliaries and setting up meetings with this high lance character.
Shouldn't we be helping out with the battle still?
Makarat asked, looking around at the absolute chaos around them as the wounded were carried away. Eldehinda shrugged.
Nah, they've got this. To be frank, I want to sit down in a chair for a few minutes. Plus, the kitchen somehow survived damage on the serving soup and bread.
Soup.
Helena said, her stomach giving a firm growl. Helena rubbed at her neck, the bruises fading already thanks to whatever it was that happened. But she could still feel the human's bloody hands gripping her.
I think soup sounds great, actually. Let's take some for Vitka as well. If she gets too hungry, she may take a chunk out of the medics.
And that's the end of Chapter 15 of Section 222. If you like the story and want to help support the channel, there's a Ko-fi link down below because YouTube doesn't give a shit. Usually each video is unlimited for the first 3 days because fuck me, I guess. You know, it's how it is. Fuck our bro. But yeah, if you want to help support the channel, Ko-fi link down below. You can drop us $1, even $1. If every viewer gave $1, that would completely blow YouTube pay rev out of the water anyway, as it is. But there are memberships if you want a shout out in the video. If you are a die-hard fan of the channel, there are memberships. And when you do these, when each book is done being written and going to be published, your name goes in the book under your subscription channel. Additionally, you get shout outs and in the video. And there are 3 tiers. Stuffy Squad, which is $5 per month. E4 Mafia at $25 per month. And the first shirt at $50 per month. Mafia and first shirts get better teasers, more discounts, the ability the ability to directly message me. That's how you say English stuff. And that kind of stuff. You know, they get little teasers and such. First and foremost are the first shirts. These guys get $50 a month and give me a lot of working room with getting the VAs their pay. And these are Thusla, Doppy X, Insane Medic, Para, and Ranger Uninspired. Thank you guys for your continued support. It does more than you could possibly know. Then there's the E4 Mafia. These guys give $25 a month. That's Airy, Noah Freeman, Flash of Green, Josh Beatty, and Crusader 0625. Thank you, boys. Shame Shield for life. Then there's Snuffy Squad. These guys get $5 a month, and all their names are listed here. But yeah, only one more chapter to go of Section 222, the third book of the Veil Rider series. And then, hey, for all you Emily Bronze fans out there, you get a whole book coming up of all Emily Bronze down the Vegas twists, trying to find the crown. Until we see you next time on this side of the veil, that was Eliza, that was RB Sounds, that was Amanda, that was Dusty Parch, a senior VA, our Sweet Belle Dam, that was Vin, that was Fire, that was Danger, and this is Garbro's Field Desk. We'll see you next time.